So, what's up people and welcome to the Mission 102 discussion of Spy Family. So Mission 102 came out a few days ago, and as always I will leave a link to this mission that's currently being shown on the publisher's official website, Manga Plus, for free to the North American audience. So if you're interested, we'll go take a look at it before they pull this mission back. Okay, so Mission 102, this was a very fine conclusion to a very fine arc. I really enjoyed this story. And the final chapter really closed it up really well. I have to say, Tatsuya Endo is a very good writer in writing very empathic, somewhat romantic sort of stories. And if he ever went into writing a romantic sort of manga, I think he would do quite well. But for the moment, I'm really enjoying Spy Family. And so let's continue on with 102. So if you recall in 101, Martha had finally returned to Berlin. And so what we see in the beginning of Mission 102 is what everybody expected. And it's extremely heartfelt when Martha finally gets back home. And the parents who thought that she had died realizes that she is alive. And the scene that you see when the three get together, her father, her mother, and herself, is a very simple scene, but it is extremely well drawn, and it brings out the message really well. But of course, Martha isn't content with that. She needs to go see a certain person, and so the very next day, she puts on her very best dress and goes off to Eden College. But it turns out to be a weekend, and so none of the teachers are there, or at least most of the teachers aren't there. And though Martha gets disappointed, one teacher, Mr. Fowler, turns out to be there and recognizes Martha right away, and he is very happy to see her because, of course, he also thought that she had passed away. And so, of course, he asks, is there anything we can do for you? And Martha, of course, asks a very specific question. And the next scene, you see her running towards a certain address of a certain teacher. And the scene that you see here is so well done. It takes up a couple of pages. And she's running towards her destination, but she gets so excited that she falls over. And so a gentleman comes up to help her. And that gentleman, of course, turns out to be none other than Henry. And so this reunion is so well done. There's very few words that come into this situation, and it takes 4 pages of drawing to go through exactly how they felt. And rather than to hear me explain it, anybody who wants to see these 4 pages should go read the chapter. It is really well done, and you could really see the feelings that both people had when they see each other. Martha for the fact that she finally got home and got to see the person that she wanted to see, and Henry because of the fact that he thought he lost probably the closest person to him, and finding out that he did not. And as beautiful as that scene is, of course it turns into the scene that every reader was dreading. And as much as we all knew that it was going to happen, it doesn't take away from the feelings we have when we actually see that scene. And of course when Henry does painfully introduce his new bride to Martha, the scene that follows of what Martha is feeling, all the things that she lost, going to a war that eventually didn't result in anything, losing her comrades in battle, almost dying for the war, and coming back to find out that the one thing that she was hoping to get to was all lost as well, was something that, of course, devastated her. And as we expect, she does keep a civil attitude and congratulates Henry for the wonderful news. But the scene that you see of just how far she has fallen due to this situation is really well brought out by Tatsuya Endo. And then just when you thought that it was one of the most painful parts of this chapter, we get to one of the most humorous parts of the chapter when we see Becky's response to her story. What we find out is that Martha was telling this story to Becky all along. And considering how Becky is an addict of these romantic type stories, you could imagine just how heartbroken she was hearing this entire thing. And of course, Becky says, you should have taken him right away. And of course, Martha says, no, home wrecking is not a good thing to do. And what we find out is that unlike a lot of other stories where the new bride is often written as the evil entity, here we find out that Henry's new wife turns out to be a very sincere person. And in fact, she admires Martha for surviving the war and being the hero so much that through her relations and their clout, they are able to help Martha come back to her love of ballet. And it is basically that situation, the ability to be able to perform the art that she has always wanted to do prior to the war, that somehow kept her going throughout this traumatic time. And what's interesting is the biggest fan of hers becomes Henry's new wife. And as Martha follows, she says that Henry loved his wife dearly as a good husband should, and she felt pride in being able to have such a good person be her friend. Or as she says, that's how she was able to get over the situation. And as goofball a character as Becky is, she responds back with a comment that I think every reader had in mind, which is, if the war hadn't occurred, Martha and Henry would have been able to successfully get together. And the fact that this war destroyed their relationship is extremely hard to accept. And then she goes one step further and mentions something that I think a lot of people have in mind when they think about wars, which is, why don't the leaders ever go to the wars that they create rather than to drag all these other people who are soldiers into the war? You know, if they have so much beef against each other, why don't they just do it themselves? And Martha answers back, well, as much as that sounds like something you would like to see, life is not that simple. And Becky asks, what do you mean by that? And Martha answers, well, I don't really know. To which Becky says, well, if you don't know, why are you saying this? And Martha says something that's extremely well thought out, which is basically that people don't understand a lot of the situations that go on. And when it gets to something that they don't understand and it makes them feel bad, then they start creating a thought of something that they can come to an agreement with, that this is how it is. And by creating that, they feel that they do understand the situation. And because it's uneasy, the typical thought pattern is that, well, that thing must be bad. That thing must be evil. And because of that, that starts creating the tension and the hate that goes around. But it's oftentimes not that it's evil or good, but just that you don't understand the situation and maybe even the cultures of the other party. And of course, that's not always the case, but a lot of times that is enough to create tension between two parties. And you could often see hate come out as a result of this misunderstanding and the lack of knowledge or feeling with respect to the other party. And if only people could accept that they don't understand, and by doing so, understand that there are other feelings that other people may have that are equally as correct as maybe yours, then maybe that would reduce the amount of hate and tension that goes on. Now, this is very interesting because considering the tremendous amount of tension that is often created by social media with regards to various things which I won't mention here, if you ever want to see that, just go out into YouTube and you'll see many situations with regards to that party is an idiot or this party is evil. and you'll start understanding exactly what Martha is talking about. And you understand why Tatsuya Endo let us go through this situation, because from Martha's perspective and considering knowing just how much she lost due to the misunderstanding and the tension and hate that's created from that you understand why she feels this way with regards to the situation. Now for Becky, she has never experienced what Martha has, and so she can't really understand how Martha feels. And of course, Martha says, this situation not only occurred in the first war, but in the second war that she also fought in. And the only thing that she was able to realize from the two wars is that hate and the resulting wars that are created are just miserable situations to be in. And when Becky hears that, she gets really shocked by saying, "You actually went back into another war knowing just how terrible the first war was?" And Martha only answers, "Yes, and he was furious as well when he heard that I was going to go back." And then we find out a very interesting point, because Becky goes, "Well, can you at least tell me who this person is? Who is this he that you're talking about?" And it took me a while, maybe it's because I have a small brain, that I didn't understand what she was talking about. Yes, Martha said he in the second war, that there was this other person or this mysterious person that she had a relationship with. And Becky didn't understand who this person was. And I didn't understand who this person was as well in the beginning. But what I can figure out now is that although from our perspective as a reader, we got to find out that the person that she was talking about was Henry, during Martha's conversation with Becky, she never identified that the person that she was in love with was Henry Henderson. And so when Becky starts asking questions and starts saying, "Oh, it was a teacher at Eden College? Don't tell me it was Mr. Henderson," or at least she was starting to say that, Martha stops her and says, "Please do not ask too many questions. That's just being nosy." And accept the things that you don't know as the things that you don't know. Which was a very interesting point, which makes sense because considering the fact that Henry Henderson is Becky's teacher, it probably would be a really awkward situation if Martha identified who this person was that she loved. And so, although it got me confused in the very beginning, I think that Martha did tell the story to Becky, but never identified who the other party was. And so she walks away from Becky, and the next scene you see Martha in a black dress coming to the cemetery carrying some flowers. And at that point, you see Henry as well at the cemetery. And the only thing I could figure out, considering that we have never seen Lucia, Henry's wife, that she may have passed away sometime in the past. And maybe it is 15 years ago that this occurred. And the conversation continues where so much time has passed by throughout their lives, and yet neither one of them has really changed all that much. Martha jokes and teases Henry for still being a terrible dancer, and Henry responds back, "Well, you're still as cheeky as you were back then." And the scene that you see of the two is an extremely heartwarming scene together, and this chapter and this arc ends with the two going off to have tea. And so it's a really beautiful story about two people who had a very productive life, but at the same time a very tragic relationship because they were never able to get together. But at the same time, their platonic relationship never went away, and you could see that they are still extremely close friends. And how this will turn out in the future will be interesting to see. But there is one point that came out at the end of this story that foretells a story that will be coming up in the future, and that is, of course, the Second War and Martha's experience in there. Considering that she had such a traumatic experience in the First War, it will be interesting to see why she went in the Second War. And although this may be an extremely dark thought, the one thing that may motivate Martha to go into battle once again is that 15 years ago, Henry's wife Lucia died because of a raid that occurred due to the Second War. Potentially, Henry may also get injured, and if that happens, I could see Martha once more going back into battle to protect the people that she loves. And so it will be interesting to see. This is just speculation, and I am not sure if any of this makes sense. But it will be interesting to see. Tatsuya Endo has sown seeds with regards to the continuing backstory for Martha. But for now, we got a lot of information with regards to the two countries, and we were able to experience a tremendous amount of feelings through this backstory. One with regards to the war, similar to what we saw in Lloyd's backstory of just how destructive and devastating war can be, but also of a relationship that two people have that go beyond just romance, and the support that these two characters continue to have even now. And so it will be interesting. This really sets up the current Martha and Henry to see what happens when Operation Strix becomes even more chaotic. But it also leads to yet another backstory that we probably will have about these two in the future. And if Tatsuya Endo continues to write in such an empathic manner, I will be looking forward to seeing what happens in the next backstory. But for now, I think a lot of people are looking forward to seeing the Forgers back again. Even the people who were angry throughout this entire arc are saying, this was a very good arc. Now please won't you get back to the real story. But for me, once again, I feel that this backstory is very crucial to the very essence of the entire story. And as much as I like the Yor Twilight relationship and the Damien-Anya relationship, none of that will have as much depth if these sorts of backstories did not occur to give you an understanding of just what Lloyd is fighting for and just what is at stake for this particular family. So I was very happy to see such a beautiful story and such a heartbreaking and heartwarming story come up within these past few chapters. But I myself will be looking forward to seeing what Tatsuya Endo has next. This kind of sets up the situation that he hasn't even started going into the really main parts of the story yet. So I am looking forward to many, many more hundreds of chapters for Spy Family. But before all of that begins, Chapter 103 will be coming out in about a month. And when it does, I'll bring out another video. I hope you join me at that time. And until then, Tatsuya Endo, thank you for this arc. Have a good break. And for everybody else, happy manga reading. And as always, Jaya, nice day, everyone.